haven't met until today. And I had a feeling right from the start that it felt great to play with you, it felt great to talk with you, to play with you, to hang with you. And I'm wondering how you go about these situations when you meet new people. And when you meet a drummer like Fabian, what's your first... What happens for you to be able to click with somebody that quickly?
I think we have to have some kind of a shared experience. I think we listen to the same kind of music. We have studied similar albums, I think. But for me, playing with a new drummer is always a little I'm always a little nervous, because I play with some good drummers over the years, and I'm kind of spoiled when it comes to that. I kind of expect really the best. I expect someone who can play, good language and have good taste and tune the drums appropriately so that there's not a conflict with the bass sound or with the piano sound, and someone who has chosen good cymbals. And so all these little things, there's so many different... I'm always a little bit nervous, and today I was totally having a ball. I mean, Fabian just rocks, sounds so great, really swings and very tasteful, and I felt, at its best, this is what it sounds like to me, like on a first meeting, just being able to get together and just find some common ground and find the quarter note together and some stuff in between, and be able to also feel that we can help each other sort of explore and get outside of the normative, the normal format of you play the melody, then we play the solos, then we trade fours or whatever. There's just being able to find some other stuff, because I'm really interested now in exploring some of those kind of things, because I've spent a lot of time in more straight-ahead contexts. I think my discography or whatever would back me up on that, but I see myself as I can play fairly predictively. I can, and actually going into a situation like today, when I first was playing with you guys, I was like, I'm gonna play really simple, and you gave me a nice cue, let's do it boom, bam, boom, or whatever the rhythm was. Yeah. So let's just do it like this, boom. But he gave me just a little nudge, just to say let's keep it real simple, and I mean that's the way I took it, and because if I approach the situation from that point, I'm not there to challenge you guys and be like, hey man, I'm from New York, man, what do you guys got? I mean, there are people that are like that in the world for sure, but no, I'm there to sort of see what we can collaborate on, and so if I go in simple, and it's always a good reminder to start with less and to start with listening with my ears.
Also, I sent no sheet music, and I just said,
True.
Let's play these songs.
Yeah.
And some of them, you told me you looked up and you kind of found a version, or I sent a version. What happens if you learn a tune? I mean, what's important for you to get the sense of a tune and to learn it and internalize it?
Well, it depends on the song. I mean, we played some Strayhorn, and some songs that I have, like Passion Flower, I played a few times, but it's been many, many years since I played that. So I had to look. I mean, I looked up everything. When he sent me a tentative list, I was kind of like, yeah, these are all great. And This Is New, I knew a much different version of that song, which is sort of a burning, 4/4 swing minor modal version, which I've been playing a lot, and I love it like that. But he suggested we try it, with the original, closer to the original, at least in terms of the harmony. Although our feel was a little more jazz, I would say, than the original recording. But yeah, I mean, I like to do the homework. I like to have, and I like it when people send me auditory things, experiences, so that I can listen, because I'm definitely a better listener than a reader. In fact, what I did is I created little parts for myself. I just wrote out, sometimes not even the chord quality, but just the root notes, and maybe I'd write if there's a rhythmic figure, I might put a little scratch that nobody but me would be able to understand what it means. But just to have, and it was actually, a lot of times you come into a situation like this and we just play songs that we all know, and that's cool too. In fact, that's what I thought I was going to be doing. But
sorry.
No, but it was fine. It was because the songs are songs that I'm interested in and I like. And if if I was like, man, I don't want to play that, then I think you would have been like, fine, we'll get John Goldsby next time.
Okay, I want to get into a topic of a very special drummer that I have had the pleasure of hearing you with on records, but also in a couple of concerts, and that is Al Foster, and you've had a very long relationship with him, and I'm wondering, with this kind of guy, this kind of master at the drums, how was it for you to kind of get a sense for with him what your role is and what you're supposed to do, and what he's expecting of you? But also, when I saw you guys play, I had a feeling that you also looked out for him. You were there for him, and kind of taking care of him musically also. Yeah, maybe you can describe that relationship a little bit.
I'll try. We might be here a while. Well, yeah, Al Foster is, for those of you who don't know, is a drummer who was born in Richmond, Virginia, and grew up in Harlem, New York, and he's completely self-taught. He actually, I don't know if you know this, but he auditioned for the High School of Performing Arts in New York City and was not given a place, so he went to Catholic school, and he set up the drums after school, and he would play the drums like from about the time he was 14. I won't give you his entire history, but just so you know. So he ended up going on to play with Miles Davis, Sonny Rollins, Herbie Hancock, Bobby Hutcherson,
Joe Henderson.
Yeah, let's not forget. And the list goes on. Cannonball Adderley was one of his first big gigs, and yeah, so he did okay for a guy who was nobody really expected much of. And when I met him, I saw him actually with Miles when I was 16. I went to see him, and I was really gassed by that band because Miles Davis had been on hiatus for some years, and I was just getting into the music. I had Charlie Parker with Miles, and I had Charlie Parker with Dizzy, and I always kind of preferred Miles. For some reason, I just liked the lyricism, and I connected to the vulnerability, I think. And yeah, I never thought that I would be friends with Al or play with him, actually. And it just sort of happened after I was at school in New York. I was knocking around town and doing gigs, and I ended up on a record date with Chris Potter. And
Sandiata?
Yeah, and Kevin Hayes on piano, and I was like, well, Al Foster's going to play drums. Wow, that's cool, and I had, I knew his sound, I knew kind of his approach, and I was just hopeful that it would be okay. And so I went to the rehearsal, and he didn't show up to the rehearsal. So I was like, okay, is he gonna? And the question was, is he then going to show up to the record date? And of course, that's where the money is. So you don't get paid for rehearsals in New York. So anyway, he showed up, and how I hooked it was similar though. It was just a feeling of comfort. He made me feel good. He made me feel like I could play, and even though I was nervous, and I barely spoke to him that first session, but I remember playing I think maybe Body and Soul we were playing, and I was playing a solo. I was like do 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 dee dee, and I just happened to glance over, and I saw him looking under his ride cymbal or his crash cymbal. He was kind of looking at me and smiling, and like checking me out, and I was like, "Ooh, I think he likes me." And it turned out, yeah, it turned out that he liked me, and he asked me to do some, to work for him, and it turned into a 20+ year relationship, friendship, and yeah. What else can I say? I mean, I can go on and on.
Yeah, please do, because I'm interested. Did he also give you some advice, or did he say what he was expecting from you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was very clear that I was like his student. I was like, because the first touring band was Chris Potter on saxophone and Dave Kokoski on piano, and little old me, and the bassist before me was Larry Grenadier. So the bar was set quite high for the, what Al expected, and he'd also played with George Mraz, with Joe Henderson and Dave Holland and Charlie Hayden, and he was always going on and on about how great Charlie Hayden was and how great George was. In fact, on the first tour, we flew to Germany. Our first gig was in Germany, and on the way there, he just kind of told me every bass player that he'd played with and which ones that he liked, and most of them that he didn't, and why. Also, why he didn't like them.
Can you go into detail?
I can't go into detail on that, but what he wouldn't like is he wouldn't like a bass player who was too loud. He really likes the bass. He sits quite low, and he likes to have the bass acoustically right. At least that's what we gravitated towards. So he's hearing my sound acoustically from the instrument, and it's really right next to his ear, and it's just, I feel like I'm feeding him this pulse, and then that allows him to because if you've seen him play, he keeps time with his right hand. Oftentimes, he's got his beautiful beat going, but then he's doing this sort of rubato conversation with whatever else is happening, or dropping little things in there, and you're like, it's almost like, man, how do you do that? You can't count it, you can't write it down, really. At least I mean, maybe I'm sure there's people that are doing it, or hopefully, but wait, what was the question? Oh yeah.
The question was, what kind of advice he gave you,
or what
advice,
he was
expecting.
Right. So yeah, the advice was like, don't play too loud, and he was very, very particular, also with pianists and with saxophonists.
Like what would you say there?
He would say, too loud, or he'd say, actually, one of the great moments, I think, was after Kevin Hayes left the band. We auditioned probably 4 or 5 different pianists.
So what does an audition look like?
It looks like you just happen to be there, and Al has a gig, and he tries you out on the gig, and you go and you get all the music, and if you show up and you play the crap out of his music and stay out of his way long enough for him to get comfortable, then you're cool. Well, it took up until the 5th person for that to happen, and
that's 5 gigs.
No, it's 5 different piano players, and at different times, and so this guy Adam Birnbaum showed up on his first gig. Our first gig of a tour was in Hamburg at the jazz club there at
Birdland.
Birdland Jazz Club, and. First of all, he learned all of Al's songs. Al writes songs at the piano by himself without any theory books or any formal training. He just sits there and dukes it out with a piano until something is happening, and then he'll say, "I think I got something," and we'll sit around the piano and learn it from him right like that. So it's a very old school way of learning, because he doesn't read music. He doesn't write it down ever. So Adam learned everything that we did. He learned the repertoire, and we got to the first gig, and he played the first set. I thought, great. I was so excited. I was like, man, Al, this guy's the shit. He's playing your tunes really well. He's not playing too long. He's tasteful. And I was like, So I said, well, tell him what you want. And he said, hey, I want you not to play all the time. I want you to leave it open because I love the sound of saxophone trio. Because he'd been playing with Joe Henderson so much, and he really was in love with our saxophone player, Ellie de Gibri, and he really loved to just mix it up, because if Ellie goes do-leo, then he can go on the drums, and they have this little, like I was saying, the interior conversation, while I'm just kind of doing this thing and helping the momentum go, and so the second set, I'll never forget this. This is a great lesson for anybody. When you ask, and someone is kind enough to actually give you an instruction, follow it, do it. Don't just do it for because so many people would do it for 2 bars. 2 bars,
yeah, right.
And think wow, I'm laying out so much. I'm really being very selfless right now. So Adam, we played Take the Coltrane, and he played the melody along with the saxophone. And then the saxophone solo starts, and we start in 2, and we're kind of we like to goof around in 2 for a while before we build into this momentum, and finally we're getting to 4/4, and it's shoulder to the wheel. Al's kind of really digging in, and he's playing all this stuff around the drums, and he looks up, and he's like, He's like, where's the piano player? You know? And Adam's just sitting there like looking at him. He's looking at him, but he's not playing a note, not one note. And finally, I was like, you can play. And he's like, Then he like unleashes, so his hippest stuff. So that was it. That's all it took. He just listened. He just followed the instructions. And I mean, I did that with him too. Like Larry told me, he said, look, Al's tunes are easy, but if you really want to have fun, just learn them. Just memorize them before, just learn it before the rehearsal. And we did rehearse at his house. And yeah, he said, just if you go prepared. And I was also totally into getting that gig because I had no other gigs. And this is like, man, this is the top drummer. You guys don't know, but Al Foster was, when I first moved to New York, he was playing every week somewhere, Freddie Hubbard or Tommy Flanagan, and then in the studio with Miles or Sonny or going on tour. I mean, he was making top dollar and playing. He had all the best gigs. Everybody wanted him, and he would wear like leather pants with like rhinestones on the side. He was very, dressed hip all the time and just really playing great, so great. And
I was always wondering about that because actually, honestly, for me, it took a little time to get into Al Foster's playing.
Actually,
I was young, and I had maybe different.
That's Al.
And we're filming it, so
Right.
super not so wise from me. But no, what I was going to say, because I love Al Foster, and it took me like a couple of years to get into him on that level where I'm into him now,
Right.
But what really made me think about, because it wasn't that I didn't like him, was just that other drummers were more closer to my heart, But such as Tony Williams, Jack DeJohnette,
Right.
these kinds of players, I gravitated more natural towards too. But I was going to say that once I thought about why is everybody playing with him? I respected him, I liked him, but I thought about, okay, everybody plays with him.
Yeah.
And then he's either a nice guy, or he apart from being an incredible musician, he makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And that was my key into it. And then settling into that feeling or that perspective, let me listen to and concentrate on how he makes everybody else feel, although I can't feel what they are feeling, but I can listen to what his musical choices have, what kind of effect they have on his surrounding, and everybody sounds incredible with him.
Right. He's like what they call he plays for the big games and the big stage. He's just really, he's unflappable. I mean, because I think if you share the stage with Miles Davis, and maybe you would think this if you think about someone like John Scofield, but anyone who's been around Miles has been tested by, you're up against one of the top artists of our time, or of all time. And so to deliver, to be in the band and to keep the gig, because anybody, he could have anybody he wanted, right? And actually Al was one of the, I think maybe the only drummer that was with him in the 70s and then came back in the 80s, and got hired back.
I think he was the guy who played with him the longest.
Possibly, yeah, quite possibly. But
Let me describe another moment. One of my favorite memories of seeing you play with Al Foster, and I think that was at the Altes Pfandhaus club here in Cologne, and you were playing. I think I saw you there 2 times, but there was a moment of high energy, up tempo tunes that were played, and then there was a moment for a ballad, and he said, "Let's play a ballad," and he looked at you. And you were supposed to start out a tune, and it was obvious that he didn't know what you were going to play. And you started out playing a little intro and then going right into the melody of Everything Happens to Me.
Oh, wow.
And that was just such a beautiful moment, because right when you played the first notes of the melody, he was listening, and then he was like, wow. And then he was like even singing along for a couple of bars.
Yeah.
And he was like, holding his heart, like, oh, thanks for playing this tune, And that was such a beautiful moment for me to witness. And, were these moments that happened often where he was like, okay, just run a tune or you decide what's going on and
There was, yeah, I mean, I sort of grew into that role with him. He started calling me Straw Boss, and I would call him Chief, He used to call Miles the Chief, and I said, well, you're the Chief now. And you couldn't call him Chief in front of someone like Ron Carter, though. Ron would be like, what?
right.
He's not the Chief. That's not your Chief, man. But I remember actually we were playing a concert in somewhere, it might have also been in Germany, and Aaron Goldberg was playing piano, and it was a live television thing, and we had been relying on Al to come up with set lists or to just call tunes. It was one of those old-fashioned kind of like, what do you want to play now, Chief? And he'd say, let's play ESP, and we just start. But then at a certain point, like on this, all of a sudden the cameras are on, and that, as you know, if you're a musician or in the performing arts, when you're making a TV show or some kind of thing like that, the stakes kind of go up a little bit, and your pulse is slightly elevated. There's a little bit more stress involved, and we didn't have a set list. But he just looked at me with like what do we do? And I was like, we play TSM, and he's like, great, count it off. And so from that point on, he was like, you got it, because it's a great. I mean, it's something I didn't ask for, and I didn't try to push my way in or whatever to be like the leader of his band, and I wasn't, definitely not the leader of his band. But that responsibility was given to me, and that was of high honor and remains so.
Does this have an effect on how you approached other bands after that?
Yeah, I don't do that anymore. No, it makes me think that I could lead a band of my own. I think that I've done. This is what people mean when they talk about, apprenticing with a master. I mean, Miles Davis went and apprenticed with Bird, and John Coltrane was apprenticing with Miles Davis and then went back with Monk again because he wanted to really get the most out of that experience. So it's sort of helped me, feel confident that I know how to put a set together. First of all, that you think about the keys and the different, maybe think about the room, think about who's in the audience a little bit. I mean, that's also part of it. And actually, one gig, not so far from here, we played in Leverkusen, and it was the first time we played a big festival appearance. It was on that first tour, and man, we played our butts off, and Al wasn't happy with the way he played. He was kind of grouchy and like, oh, I didn't play good. So we walked all the way through the crowd and back upstairs to this dressing room, like through like 2,000 people, and they're screaming like, we want more. And I was like, man, what are you gonna do? We got to play something else. What do you want to play? And he's like, I don't know. What do you want to play? And I said, let's play Blue Bossa. And he said, all right, fine. So we went out there, we played Blue Bossa, and we played like ba 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 da ba, and the place was like, rah! Blue Bossa is a song that we know. I think that's something in jazz music. A lot of times you go to a concert and you have no idea what the songs are, or you've never heard them before. Not everybody knows Blue Bossa, right? I mean, so he trusted me further with like I make a few calls like that, and everyone is into it. Then. And I've definitely made some mistakes too. I mean, I've done some, gotten ahead of myself and in certain aspects and caused tension from time to time. But that's also learning for me. It's a learning experience for me to see how a person wants to be handled in terms of. I mean, one of the things I thought would be great would be to make him a website. So I just did it and put it up, and then I sent his wife a link. And said, hey, guess what I did for you guys? And she's like, what? She wasn't happy because she was going to pay somebody and she had plans to do it and I didn't ask. And there's a lot of, so there's, you got to be careful how much you help someone. Sometimes right. you can go a little too far.
I made a little website for you today.
You did? Oh,
no.
That's sweet. Did you use this side or that side?
Okay, you already talked about Kevin Hayes a little bit, and he's one of my favorite piano players,
Oh yeah, me
of
too.
that generation and in general as well. And you've had moments with Kevin Hayes in various, settings, musical settings.
Yeah.
But right now, I would like for you to, because you've witnessed him with Al Foster
Mm-hmm.
for quite some years, and then also you've played in Kevin's trio with Bill Stewart.
Right.
Just an incredible trio. But I'm sure, and it sounds to me that way, that Kevin gets into different aspects of himself when he's with Al, and then when he's with Bill and you. So, and you're right in the middle of that, and I want to see what your perspective of that is.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, Kevin first of all, I've known Kevin since 1988 or something, since we were both, I was still in college, I think, when I met him. And we started playing together a little bit then. And even in the early 90s when I was first living in New York, after graduating college, Kevin was already on the road. He was going on the road with Benny Golson. I'm going out with Benny Golson and Buster Williams for 2 weeks or whatever. He was really already heavily in demand, and he never finished music school. He just had this thing. He has great ears. He can hear anything, any wrong note that I play, he can make it sound like it's the best thing ever. And in fact, that became partly one of our things with standards, was really like we'd start a tune and try and just really see if we could take it apart, and especially on a longer tour when we're playing the same 10 or 12 songs every night. Some songs would remain fairly static, like Tryin' Times is kind of a blues. We'd kind of do it the same way every night, and I learned a lot about that from Bill too, because Bill is such a master of architecture, and he seems to have a really good sense of when it needs to kind of stretch and go out, or when it needs to just really just be like just right here, and he's also, he thinks about that in the terms of a night of music. He doesn't want it all to be the same tone. He doesn't want everything to sound like deeply intellectual or too poppy or funky. He likes it. Bill likes variety, I think, like most people. And so he and I kind of together, we would get together on that, and we wouldn't really talk about it much. It just sort of would happen. And then when Kevin was playing, so when we're playing with Kevin, we're definitely serving his needs. He was writing the tunes, making arrangements. About the only thing I ever did was get us a record date. One time I convinced him to do a record of standards because I thought it would be great for us to document some of that.
For heaven's sake?
For heaven's sake, yes. And he's
like,
one
of
okay.
my favorite records.
He's like, okay, so you play the melody on For Heaven's Sake then. I was like, okay, all right. And I have to credit one of my early teachers with just getting me into playing the melodies on the bass, and that's Todd Coleman. When I was studying with him at William Patterson College, he said, "Yeah, you play okay, but if you just play more lyrically, I think that would really be cool. It'd be really nice if you'd do that." And I said, "Well, how do you do it?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Maybe learn the melody on the bass. Why don't you learn how you want to play it?" And then we made a thing of that, like sing it and play it. Like, how would you sing that? You wouldn't sing it da 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 da. That's not how you sing. Everything happens to me. So he would kind of push me to look for and that's also incidentally a great way to sort of discover your own voice and your own way of presenting a song. Even though as bass players we're not often called on to do that, except when we take a solo. So I think that what that did was it helped me become a more lyrical soloist, which incidentally is one of Al's big things. He's always like, "I like it when you play lyrically." Yeah. Lyrical. He likes storytelling. And so I'll get back to Al just for a second. I realized I skipped one thing. That what he would do when I was playing with him is he would say, like if I was having a good moment or something, he would often not play behind the bass solo. He'd just sit there and listen. And he'd sometimes sing along. Like if he found the melodic thread where I was going, he'd start going da 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 da, and he'd just like kind of catch, because his ears are legendarily amazing, and his recall and he's got this intuition like this ability to what they call hear around the corner. He can hear what's, he could have heard that train before it came. He would kind of understand that it was coming and be ready for it. And that's something that's really special about just the way he hears. So that's one thing that he did for me. So now back to Kevin Hayes. So that was Al. Back to Kevin Hayes. Kevin, when he was playing with Al, understood that Al wanted a particular. Al's really into 60s Blue Note recordings. He considers himself a bebop drummer, hard bop drummer, all the like in the lineage of like Art Blakey and Max Roach and Art Taylor and Philly Joe. Those are his big heroes. But really he's a lot more than that. I mean, he did a lot of like, I think he could have been more involved in ECM, the sound of ECM records. Like he played with Richie Byrek quite a bit, and he definitely, something about his sound, I think it really works in that context as well. But he doesn't feel that. I don't know why. He's not buying into that. I've tried to get him to consider that, but yeah. So Kevin going into Al's band realized that that's what Al needed, and Kevin can do that for days. Now the problem became, I think, for Kevin artistically, was that he felt that was sort of boxing him into a stylistic paradigm that he'd been put in this little box. Like, here's a guy that that does that hard bop thing. He's got Horace Silver, and he's got some Chick Corea, and he's got some Herbie, and and Kevin really understands this music. He's just been so good at picking up on it. So in a way, like one time he came to me in my hotel room. He said, "Man, I don't think I can do this anymore. I gotta get myself out of this. I'm in a box, and I gotta kill." He said, "I have to kill the Buddha. I have to do away with this." And he even said that to Herbie. He went up to Herbie and he said, I have to not ever listen to you ever again. I'm sorry. I love you, but I can't be around you. You're no good for me. And not that Herbie's not the greatest. I mean, Herbie's amazing, but so that was that was when Kevin made the decision to move on, and that allowed space for Adam to come in. So,
right.
But that was the thing.
Also, one of my other favorite albums is Seventh Sense.
Oh yeah.
Kevin Hayes. This time with another drummer, Brian Blade.
Right.
And you also have some history with him, and I'm curious of how it feels to work with him and what you've learned from him.
It's another long chapter. I'll give you the bullet points. I mean, as you guys know, I mean, Brian is probably the top guy. Brian and Bill Stewart are the top drummers, I would say, that of my generation. They've really defined. Like I think of say Brian is more of a Fred Astaire type, and Bill is more like Baryshnikov or something. Maybe, I'm not sure if that metaphor is gonna fly, but something along the lines of Bill being so highly skilled technically and so precise, and Brian being such a beautiful artist, just such a beautiful force. And so working with him, I mean, I've known him also since the early 90s. And we've had periods where we didn't play together for a long time, but I can tell you that about maybe 5 years ago now, he called me and I was driving somewhere and I pulled over. I didn't want to be like, I'll call him back. I mean, I know when he calls me, it's something that I want to talk to him about, or somebody's died or something. Something very important is going to transpire. So he called and asked me if we had this band that used to play at Smalls on Thursday nights, and he said you wanted to get that band back together and make a recording, and I was like, just say when, man. I'm there. I mean, we actually, the last time I played here was with him. I was just thinking about it. That was 2005, I think. Yeah. Anyway.
That's the year I came to Cologne, actually.
Is that so?
Yeah. Okay, so do you have some remembrances from that record, Seventh Sense? Because also I think John Scofield produced that record, right?
Yeah, John Scofield produced it. He was there. Nobody really said much to us. Bob Belden was also there. That was another moment too, because I'd been playing jam sessions with Kevin at his house on Carroll Street in Brooklyn, and it was often like Seamus Blake or Josh Redman or like the heavy cats, because Kevin played in Josh's band I think before Brad was in the band, and so yeah, we would Kevin was writing all this music, and I kind of had a feeling that he had a record date planned, but I wasn't sure. I mean, he was doing little records for like Crisscross and Steeplechase and stuff like that, and this Japanese label called Jazz City. But yeah, I was at home one night after one of those sessions, and the phone rang, and it was Kevin's. Back when people would call and not text, there was no email. This was a long time ago. And he said, "Yeah, I just wondered if you felt like making this record for me with on Blue Note Records." I was like, "Whoa!" I dropped the phone. I fell on the floor actually, and I tried to be cool about it. I was like, "Yeah, I just dropped the phone. Sorry." Yeah, I think I can make that. I think and it was, we'd been playing this music, and it just came together very organically. Brian was making a lot of the sessions, and even Steve Nelson would come in from he lived in like New Brunswick, so he'd drive like an hour and a half just to come and play for 3 hours and then go home. For no pay, just for some snacks.
Yeah.
Be lucky to have some snacks, actually. But yeah, and Kevin wrote all the music or arranged it, and we did a few gigs, and we went into the studio. We had 2 days in the studio, and I remember still, how it felt to like turn on the radio in my car on Jazz 88 and have them play that record.
Yeah.
And I was very proud of it. I mean, I think it came out okay.
It's an incredible record. Yeah.
Really incredible.
Yeah. Listen to it this morning.
I think Downbeat only gave it 3.5 stars.
Well, what do they know?
That's true.
Okay, one last topic, and I'm really interested in your ears actually, because you have, and I noticed it, on stage as well, of course, that you have incredible ears and are able to follow a pianist or your ideas very, very easily and very, very quickly. And I wondered what you did to improve that.
I'll say another name then. Mark Copeland really helped me with that, because he's a pianist. He actually lives in Bonn now. He also escaped the USA and is living in Bonn. And he's a pianist with whom I worked also around the time I was just getting out of college. And he's the first guy I've ever played with that I was like, man, I can't hear what he's doing. What are those chords? He's playing these what we call clusters, which means you don't know what it really is. It's just a lot of notes very close together. And so I actually took a lesson with him, and he said, well, if you want to know what I'm doing, you just got to transcribe a piano solo. So I did. I found a Herbie solo that I thought was really great on a blues.
Which one?
It's from the live at the Steve Allen show. It was like Wayne's first gig. It was a
right.
TV show.
No blues.
And I had no blues, and I had it on cassette tape. And I remember thinking wow, and first of all, I was just really drawn to the way the band was playing. They were really on fire. It was Wayne Shorter's first appearance with that band, I think.
Yeah.
In 1964. And Herbie, like Al would say, Herbie kind of burned on everyone. Herbie kind of really played a great solo on that tune. So I figured I better figure this out. So I figured out the right hand. I wrote it out. I took it to Mark, and he's like, what about the comping? What about the left hand? That's what you're trying to hear, right? And I was like, oh. So I went home, and I sat there for about 4 days listening to the first chord, which was an F7 chord, and he voiced it E flat, G, A, D. And I was like, oh. When I finally figured that out, that opened up the whole, I was like, oh, I understand
right.
rootless voicings now. Because then you get that one, then you get the next one, which is D, G, A flat, C. And and you just you figure out these, and then, oh wow, that's a diminished chord with a major seventh. So you start to sort of pick apart the harmony bit by bit, and that activity was, I mean, I used to do ear training a lot, too, in those days. In fact, I ended up teaching ear training, but I used to do ear training with Ben Monder.
Oh, that's a good teacher, I suppose.
He was good. Well, I mean, it was we were head to head, man. I mean, it was really we'd play 8 notes for each other, and what are they? Write them down.
Oh, great.
Tell me what this is. he can always play much weirder stuff than I could. But I could hear it. I could hear what he was playing. Anyway, I mean, your training was important to me. I'm an ear player more than a visual player. Everyone's a little different, but I learned by listening, and especially jazz, but even classical music. My classical teacher, when I was younger, would sometimes sing parts to me or play them for me, and not so much to show me visually, but if I could hear it, I could get it happening. But I'm glad you appreciate that. That's just kind of all I got. I got my hearing, got my my rhythm, sense of rhythm.
You have some stuff.
Lyricism.
Okay, Doug, I think we need to wrap it up now.
Okay.
And I want to thank you for talking to me and for being here today. It's a great pleasure.
That's a great honor for me. Thank you. Appreciate it.